And we are live with our 102nd, episode 102. How would you say that? 102nd episode?
Episode 102. Yeah, 102nd, whatever.
Yeah. So anyways, we're live with our 102nd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host, Seth Law, at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome once again. We got a bunch of stuff to talk about today. The news over the last week has been pretty interesting on the security side of things. I mean, it's been interesting on the world side of things too, but I think we've beaten that to a bloody pulp at this point because there's no. Yeah, I don't know what else to say about it besides, hey, it's Tuesday, and apparently it's Tuesday because I just can't figure out what day it is anymore. Yeah, but there's been a lot going on. If you missed it, all the forward CloudSec stuff was yesterday. I listened to quite a few of those talks as I could. A lot of good info. Way to go, Scott Piper, on putting that together because it was very relevant to the security industry in general, but it did feel like a new, like it was a conference. I know we've talked about it for a couple of weeks about conferences, like being virtual. It's really hard to kind of get up and engaged with them, but I felt like they did a really good job the way they moderated it, the way they had basically an MC that was stepping in every time and pulling in quotes and comments from Slack and the other channels that were there, the Twitch stream. It just all seemed to go off really well, all things considered. And I mean, it's funny, like noticing those sorts of things now, because 3 months ago, right, just the fact that it would have been virtual and there was a stream anywhere would have been cool. And now at least I'm getting more picky. I don't know about you, Ken. But like the engagement and how that actually works, it felt like it felt very well done, I guess is all I was trying to say.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I hadn't got a chance to check it out, unfortunately, yesterday. I was pretty swamped, but yeah, something I will go back and look at. But yeah, it's just been busy time.
Yeah, it is. And I know people have been asking about Midsummer Nights Con. We have a couple of dates that we're floating by speakers right now just to make sure we can get everybody on board. That's what happened last time is we had people lined up and then had, 25% of them bail at the last minute. So we understand how it is right now. So we'll get that out once we know where it's at.
Yeah, that's just to do with the current landscape we're all dealing with. So
yeah,
it's not anything. It's just a side effect of trying to schedule things during a pandemic. So,
yep. And not knowing what things look like in 2 weeks, much less, a month out.
Yeah. So,
let's see what else has been going on. Black Hat, please register if you're interested in next level bug hunting code edition. Ken and I will be running one session. I believe it's August 3rd and 4th. With a code review session for red teamers, basically for people that are explicitly looking to exploit bugs, coming at it from an offensive perspective as opposed to a defensive perspective. So we'll show the tips and tricks that we use, especially when we're doing some sort of a dynamic assessment I like to call it kind of gray box or hybrid assessment, where we have the code and how we actually find the vulnerabilities and exploit them, back to back. We'll be reviewing a lot of open source projects in that one from an offensive perspective to see also what else we can find. So it'll be a good time. Please consider us if you are so interested. I think that covers conferences. Is there anything else? I mean, I know we got picked up for like OWASP San Francisco or AppSec San Francisco, whatever, Global AppSec Days, whatever they call it now, right? Like I can't even remember anymore. OWASP's conference in San Francisco in November, I guess, October, November, but I kind of doubt that one's going to happen as well. Just given the current landscape and the way things are going.
Yeah, so there is one other one I'm putting in here is
Oh yeah.
the stat. Well, I put in the tweet, uh, but it's hold on. Let me get the RSVP link here, or is it RSVP? Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I'm gonna give another link for this here shortly. There we go. Sorry, this is the one I meant to do. So this is a meetup for we're basically going to take and do a live review.
Yeah.
So it should be fun. We're going to just try and apply our methodology. Briefly walk through the methodology as we're doing it live with against an application, see what we can get done in an hour. I think part of the point here that we want to show people is with a system how quickly, with a methodical system, how quickly you can get through just even understanding the app to identifying risks and vulnerabilities, just like actually doing the code review. So it should be pretty fun, I think.
Yeah.
Definitely a little nerve-wracking when you do stuff live, but whatever. We've been doing it a long time. It should be fine.
Yeah. I think we'll be okay, right?
Yeah.
Maybe if, depends on, if we decide to add some whiskey or whatever to it as well, because that could make it more interesting or less, depending on, your choice, right? Like,
yeah, it is like middle of the day on a Sunday or something. So yeah.
We'll see. We don't even have a project picked out for that as far as what we're going to do. Like, I think we're leaving it pretty much until day of or a couple days before. So we don't have any, like, we're going to go into it very blind. So very true to life. And here's a code base. Where do you go? Right. I am fairly certain we'll pick a language we are somewhat familiar with, just so we don't have to jump into, hey, now we have to figure out how Clojure works or something like that. So
yeah, maybe we'll ask for suggestions on our Slack channel or something of what to review.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea. So if you have any ideas, any open source projects that are near and dear to your heart that you want us to analyze, something along the lines of, I guess, Node, Go, Ruby, throw us whatever and we'll take a look at it to see if it fits the profile for this one.
Now, after last week, somebody's going to be
it can't be Ruby, right? Like, what was it, Ken? Something about worst and Ruby, right? I can't remember. So
that got posted at the time that I had started on that little rant. It got that YouTube link with that time got posted in my work Slack. So I was like, guess we'll see what happens. Now people take that. But no, it's honestly, a lot of people share the same opinion, so it's not that unique or crazy in any sense. So
no, and I always go back to this, right? Like code review specifically, right? There's a reason why we put forth a framework to actually do it, because it's damn hard, right? It's not an easy process in and of itself, and certain languages lend to easy review of functionality, and Ruby's just not one of those, right? So it just the way that metaprogramming works makes it more difficult to figure out what's going on, especially when you're not in it on a daily basis. Like most languages are like that, though, right? Like if I'm building, say, Hacker Tracker, right, on a daily basis, and I'm into Swift code, it's a lot easier for me to analyze iOS because I'm in that mindset. I'm in the mindset of, okay, this is how Swift works. This is how the iOS platform works, how Apple has implemented these different libraries. It's just an easier process. It takes a little bit more to come up to speed on anything. And then Ruby is another extension on top of that because of the way it works. So like it's an advantage for programmers on some level as well. Like if you enjoy the metaprogramming and how that goes about, it's great, right? For functionality and actually fast prototyping, all that kind of jazz. But for code review, especially looking for security vulnerabilities, can make things complex. So, yeah.
What's interesting is I actually thought, on the note of it though, I actually thought Elixir was going to be bigger than it turned out to be, and that it was going to be adopted more widely by Rubyists than it ended up being. I mean, people use it, but not like I thought. I thought it was going to be like the next big thing. I mean, I guess when you look at languages, it does take time to really become popular, but seems like more folks from Ruby land are switching over to like Node and Go, and
Yeah,
those seem to be but a lot of Go. So yeah, that seems to be where the trend is going. Anecdotally, if that helps anyone.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
I wonder. I don't know. Like I know we don't have necessarily there's PYPL, Popularity of Programming Language Index.
Oh right.
And I always like to pull that up, right? Because Ruby's in there, but it has fallen quite a bit, right? In comparison, Go has come up, Kotlin, and Python still shows as number one. I don't know if I necessarily. I don't know. I need to look at what that research actually comes from. If that's just like they're scanning GitHub projects.
It's kind of weird looking at it because like TypeScript is not the same as say like the same categories as something like I don't know, pick something Objective-C or Python, right? Like I typically see TypeScript used in like templating. Am I wrong on that? Is TypeScript used for more than that? It probably is. I'm just missing something.
Oh, well, TypeScript is just strongly typed JavaScript, right?
Right, exactly. But primarily I see it used in templating. Like I don't even know that. I'm sure you can.
Oh, no. Like, yeah, it can be used as a full-blown language, right? Because it's
JavaScript.
Yeah, it's JavaScript. It can be like the JavaScript compilers can compile TypeScript. It's just basically JavaScript that is strongly typed.
Oh, I've seen this more. No, I take that back. I'm sorry. I have actually seen this used for more than templating. As a matter of fact, I've reviewed an app that consisted of all TypeScript. So
yeah. I see TypeScript along the same lines of Go, right? Like the popularity, because it takes away that kind of free-form JavaScript that is loosely typed and everything's kind of vague to you must do it this one way. And so it's a lot easier to pass around. So I've seen it in startups specifically. They seem to be falling towards TypeScript. So as opposed to just generic JavaScript for Node.js, right?
What's Dart? Yeah. I've never even heard of Dart, but it's got like 4 arrows. It's on the rise.
Where's Stephanie?
Oh, I should probably give a link, by the way. Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, yeah.
Probably give a link to what we're looking at. Yeah. I'm curious now.
Dart's been around for a long time.
Really?
I mean,
yeah.
Yep.
Look at me. I suck. I don't know anything. Someone's gonna just edit that clip. What I just said, edit that into its own clip.
Yeah, it's been about 10 years. Yeah, that's a Google supported language, right?
Huh.
I remember because I remember having discussions about it quite a while ago. Yeah, they're under like 2.84 stable release, right?
Python's
C style syntax. So I think it's similar to Go, right? If I remember right. But
how the hell is PHP number 5?
WordPress
2. Man, popularity. Yeah. Well, I guess that's true. WordPress. Man, no thanks. Yeah, no. C and C++. That makes sense. This isn't based off like happiness it provides developers. Clearly, it's just based off of like its usage.
No. So if you look at the left, right, the PYPL Popularity of Programming Index is created by analyzing how often language tutorials are searched on Twitter.
Right? Interesting.
So the more of these, yeah. So that makes sense, right? Python, Java.
What we need is a developer happiness index for programming languages.
Does one exist? We're all over the board today.
Honestly, if it did, it'd probably be like no code as like top number 1 spot, maybe top 0 spot, we should say, because computer science, yo.
Computer science, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, we're probably all over the place. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters anymore. No, I'm kidding.
I see a lot of things about happiness indexes. Yeah, that's where we go. But yeah, it's an interesting way to analyze popularity of languages, based on how many people are Googling for tutorials. It makes sense. Like they do a lot of things. I know they've used that in the past to predict flu seasons, like how bad the flu is going to be because of the number of people that are Googling symptoms, right? So maybe it's just that no one actually studies Python or has Python books. They just do it all online now. So yeah, whatever.
This is here's a color kind of question. That's a good question.
That's a good question.
It would probably be done in YAML. just a YAML red, just a config file in YAML. Yeah, I don't know. No idea. Probably some Jekyll thing would probably be what it would be built in if I had to guess, because it's just easy.
Come on, it's meta. It would be Ruby, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Man.
Yeah, that's where we're at today. Okay.
That's where we're at. We have like a whole bunch of topics, but this is more interesting. Yeah.
Well, maybe we dive into the first one because I don't know if we get past it. The TikTok, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good idea to talk about that. Do you want to cover that, or should I give a synopsis? I don't have any preference.
Either way, right? Like, I don't necessarily have an article up if you want to dig it up, but
sure.
The main issue here is that TikTok. Okay, so first of all, there's a new version of iOS that's coming out, right? The new version of iOS actually reports on application behavior and what they consider to be dangerous application behavior. And this goes, in line with, some of the things that are going on with Android and some analysis that's been done against the TikTok app previously. But after the developers installed the iOS 14 and TikTok, they noticed that TikTok was catching copy and paste data basically on a regular basis and supposedly sending it off someplace. But at the very least, it's catching that copy and paste data when you're in other applications. So there's screenshots out there of somebody on Instagram or something else, and TikTok keeps popping up, or iOS keeps popping up the notification that TikTok has accessed the paste information, right? So it's attempting to access this data that it should not, number one, have access to. Number two, that could potentially contain things like, one password, passwords. It could contain anything else that you copy and paste into it. So it's attempting to capture keystrokes along those same lines, and they're doing all sorts of malicious. Well, it looks like they're doing malicious things. Now, the issue with TikTok as well is that it is not owned by a U.S. company. This is the other fear that people have. It's owned by a Chinese company. So all the data is going to like Alibaba Cloud. So it's going off-site, right? And most people don't realize what the back end is that's there. There are a couple of security researchers that have pulled apart the TikTok application to analyze what's going on within it. It sounds like they just barely enabled even HTTPS for all the traffic, but they're encoding some things, sending it across. They're sending info about the cell phone that's being used, like IMEI, contact information if they can scrape it. So basically, it's this data collection application that is impersonating or representing itself as a social media interaction. And I know it's very popular, but there are certain risks that are associated with actually using that application. Ken, what were your thoughts on it?
Well, there's a few other things. So back in January, it was reported, I think it was like February and March. So January, sorry, I think it was January that it was reported to Apple. And I think originally Apple was like, nah, not a big deal. This was back when TikTok, the first time it was reported, it was stealing data. It was using the Google SDK, and they blamed it on just like the natural behavior of that Google SDK. So that became like a big headline for a few minutes, and then kind of went away. And, whatever, TikTok's a popular app, a lot of people are using it. And then like this more recent report after them having what gets more interesting, I think, is that they had okay, so the report was now the actual code within TikTok's doing what you said, which is copying and pasting. And the video shows every 1 to 3 keystrokes being captured. But I think one point that was brought up that's pretty interesting is the ability to access the system-wide clipboard. So if you are a native iOS user, meaning you're like everything you have is like an iPhone and a laptop and an iMac, when you copy from one computer, when you copy contents from one computer, it goes into a system-wide clipboard where you can like, you and I actually talked about this at one point, Seth, back when it first came out. We're like, ooh, that feels weird and a little sketchy, because it's handy, but it's a little sketchy. So as always, convenience breeds, maybe some things given up. So in this case, if you copied, let's say, your bank's password from one computer, and you want to, like, I don't know, put it in your phone or something like that, cool. Like, well, TikTok just was able to grab that data, is basically what the report was saying. All those things put together, it makes it pretty scary. But the thing is, like, I think we've talked about this many times, which is, again, people will always, more often than not, I should say, not always, it's too polarizing, but most often they will choose basically convenience over privacy any day of the week.
Well, and I mean, this is part of the issue, right? Is that I know my kids, like, they like to pass around the TikTok videos that are going around, right? And it is very
By the way,
with that generation. So
I don't mean to make you sound old, but listen to what you just said.
Yeah, I know, my kids.
The TikTok videos. The kids are making the TikTok videos.
Yeah.
The TikTok's popular with the kids, bro.
It is. It is popular with the kids.
So funny. Anyway, sorry. Please continue.
No, that's it. I'm done.
That's it. They don't. If you tell your daughter and her friends that this is going on, do you think they care? I'm genuinely asking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know my daughter and my son would, because they get it all the time from me, right? As far as, hey, there's a trade-off here. We need to be careful about what we're installing, what we're using. But her friends, no, they don't care, right? I'm just the scary guy that knows how to hack things, right? That's what it boils down to. So you don't mess with,
I think Fortnite does it pretty creatively. And this is actually how I was having that, speaking of, like, droning on about security to uninterested younger people. I was in the truck with my son. He's he'll be 8, and for this stuff, but everybody else will be like 8 in August. And Fortnite, if you enable 2-factor authentication, they actually allow you to, they unlock some like emotes. You may not know what an emote is, but it's pretty much like what it sounds like. It's like throwing up the peace sign or whatever. Yeah, exactly, like that one. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I'm only saying you might not know, because I didn't know until he started playing with what all that lingo, what all the lingo was. But anyways, to actually unlock that, plus like involve yourself in some of the additional add-on games, they incentivize you to enable 2-factor authentication, which I thought was pretty cool. It actually led to a whole discussion, probably a mostly unwilling discussion on my son's part, of me explaining 2-factor authentication and why that matters. And then he got into like passwords, and he's like, well, what I would do is I would do and he just spouted off some random like 5 or 6 digit number as his password. He's like, no one would guess that. And I'm like, well, let's talk about it, And so we got into all the scenarios, and so it ended up being pretty productive. But yeah, I feel like it's probably the same as anybody else who's like, the son or daughter of a piano player or of an architect. They're probably going to hear about their work. But yeah, that was cool. Like that I think that's a cool way to incentivize people to enable two-factor authentication. Just give them something for doing that.
Yeah. For making it. Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, rolling into two-factor auth, right? For financial data or financial access, anything like that, right? Like we've been having discussion, especially as the kids get older and they're like, okay, now I have a bank account. All right. Now we have to talk about this, right? You can't use the same password you used for the last 5 years at your school, right? Like it's just not secure. So I don't know. At some point, like it almost feels like a blog post or a channel that we need to put together separately. That's just like security for, like, I don't want to go back to the dummies concept, but security for people that aren't security people, right? Like the advice that you give to your spouse, your parents, your kids about how to navigate, because it's difficult, right? If we go back to TikTok, right? Like India basically just banned all of these apps that are coming out of China within the last 12 hours, right? Including TikTok, but WeChat and a whole bunch of other ones, because they're like, hey, this is a way that they feel like it's a way that the Chinese government is gathering data about their citizens. And right,
do you know how they're banning that?
They pulled everything out of the app stores, right? So anything like Google Play or Apple, the App Store in India, you can no longer download TikTok. You can no longer download WeChat. I think if you have it installed, you can still use it, but I wonder if they're starting to do some traffic restrictions as well.
Yeah, that would be super interesting. Yeah. That's I'm going to look into that because I'm curious on how you would ban that in more than a legal sense, without having full control over someone else's device.
Yeah.
I hear you, I feel like anybody listening to this podcast, we hear that. We're like, pretty sure there's a way around that.
Yeah.
So, and if you're not, then you should keep listening to the podcast. There's probably a way around. No, that's interesting though, that they banned it. And you said it was because they didn't want citizens' data being collected and whatnot.
Yeah. The quote in that article I just posted, maybe post that New York Times article, from the industry or India's Ministry of Electronics and Information Tech, basically said these Chinese apps are stealing and surreptitiously transmitting users' data in an unauthorized manner to servers which have locations outside India. Compilation of these data, it's mining and profiling by elements hostile to national security and defense of India, which ultimately impinges upon the sovereignty and integrity of India, is a matter of very deep and immediate concern, which requires emergency measures.
Interesting. And also, what's really funny, by the way, and ironic, is that when I click on, like, say, a Forbes article that's like talking where was stealing data, that they make me enable adware to read the fucking article about how it steals data.
Yep. So there.
What was that emote you used earlier? Hey, Forbes.
Good thing we're sponsored, right?
Good thing we have no strings on us. So we're real boys. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
But this, okay. And I know this has been a topic on the podcast previously, right? But this goes back to the whole idea. Like we had that article a couple weeks ago that we talked about when it comes to threat modeling, and how when we in the industry perform threat models, we don't give nation state actors proper due, right? And I feel like this is in a direct response to that, right? As a nation, India looked at it and did a threat model and said, "Holy shit!" Right? Like we have a border with China. We're in this dispute with them, and they're collecting data on all of our citizens, right? So at some level, they decided, hey, it's not worth it. We're going to cut out that nation state threat actor, at least, this low hanging fruit that we can, and move on from there. I don't know, but this gets really interesting though, as you start to talk about bring your own device, like for corporations, and other. I mean, you're talking about the iCloud copy and paste stuff because you can suck data out of there too. Right. But anything that an organization uses within like kind of this trust boundary that they have with an employee, at this point, you really have to consider what other applications are on that device, because there are ways to get at that data. And I know that a lot of those platforms, a lot of those VPN providers will attempt to segregate off the corporate data from the typical device or the device that it's running in, because it's considered untrusted. But this makes me wonder, right? How effective is it? Is there a possibility there? Because Apple at this point, like no one knew that this was going on, or if they did, they weren't saying anything about it, which means that there's possibilities there for that sort of leakage to be happening, even if it's unintended, even if the protections are in place. I mean, Apple's a walled garden, Google's pretty open, but there's still a risk that is associated with that and running inside of that BYOD environment. I don't know. It just seems to spider out, and it's very easy to get tinfoil hatty here because of the nature of what's going on.
Yeah, I didn't know. I'd never heard the word techno-nationalism, as they said. That's been a thing in India for a bit now, and they view like you said, their citizens' data as a sovereign national asset, which is a pretty cool way to. I mean, in my opinion, anyways, it's kind of like that's a cool way to say it, to look at it. It's
I mean, here in the U.S., we've always been pretty loosey-goosey about even privacy information, as opposed to the EU and other places in the world. And I wonder if it's just because it's never something that has, we've never been under an oppressive regime that has used that data to do bad things, right? Quote unquote. I don't know.
It's funny, man. I've never been to India. I need to put that on the list of places. It should be, it's totally random, but I always wanted to go. Yeah. And just so that's kind of, hopefully when all this travel opens back up, make a trip there.
Nope, it's done.
It's done forever. No more travel. Yeah. We should probably also talk about the latest happenings with OWASP, as a matter of fact. I don't know if you want to go how far I'll go in as far as you want on this one, but for those that don't know, the executive director position has gone to Andrew Vanderstock. I think Mike McCammon was head for was the executive director for, I want to say 18 months or 2 years, something like that. I honestly don't remember, but I know it's not been long at all. And supposedly he was, and Mike, so we've, I know Mike, and he and I actually dialogued a lot, getting them moved over to pages from the OWASP.org media wiki to, using GitHub pages for the OWASP organization. There was a lot of effort that went into that. It was really good work. Having said that, I don't know. I don't have the inside scoop on why he stepped down, but it sounded like that was never going to be a permanent position, which I was not aware of. I don't know. I honestly don't know with any of this stuff anymore, but I think it brought up some interesting some interesting points about OWASP, and because they've switched through leadership in the last few years. Like the first time the original executive director, trying to remember all of the scenarios. I think the first executive director passed away, if I'm not mistaken. Gosh, I don't want to like say stuff that's not true.
I don't know if I realized that, if I just wasn't as involved at the time that they passed away. I mean, I knew right before Mike,
I thought so.
right?
And then yeah, right. So there's the OWASP has changed hands a few times, basically in that position over the last few years, and so it's been kind of like it's getting a little rocky. I think I'm just going to be honest. Like I think it's been a little rocky for those of us who are deeply embedded, in the sense that like deeply embedded in AppSec period, and like that's OWASP is like it's like our organization, right? Collectively for AppSec, or it has been for a long time, meaning it has a lot of projects for like open source security tooling, like cheat sheets, secure coding guides, methodologies. Like it's been a body of open source work, and it's all been collected under there. And then for better or worse, a lot of that work has turned into what is secretly, not so secretly, behind. Oh, you already posted that. Okay, cool. Here, I'll link to that. Yeah, so it's been folded into like PCI and various compliance standards as like, have training on the OWASP top 10 or, whatever, like most common vulnerabilities. And so OWASP has been entwined and deeply entrenched in AppSec. Most of our conferences, AppSec conferences, are held by OWASP, but it's I'm interested to see where it goes with Andrew Vanderstock's leadership. And I'm trying to be optimistic about it for sure. I hope though that when he's in that position, he stays there for a while. I don't think that it's good for the organization to cycle through leadership so frequently at all. And while there were definitely some good things that came out of OWASP, or there are good things that continue to come out of OWASP, and this is by no means am I like saying down with OWASP or anything, far from it. What I am saying is that I think the leadership this is my opinion, I think leadership needs to stay in place for a while. I think it needs to become, one of the gripes I've heard is become a conference organization. And so I think that there needs to be like a reinvigoration of the projects that are under the OWASP banner. And then frankly, like there probably needs to be some cleaning of house on the leaders list. I've watched leaders lists on the threads where people say just, it's okay to have like civil discussions, but some of that stuff is not so civil, and I wouldn't really consider it a discussion. And, so I think there needs to be some cleaning of house to for sure in some respect. This, I could go on about this forever, but there is new leadership. I think OWASP is at a point where it can go one way or the other. And for me, I'd like to see more of a focus on like the technical projects and, less politics, more like work. So,
yeah. From a strict like security, like application security perspective, I do feel like Andrew is he's a good choice, because he is coming from the AppSec side of things. He's done work on the OWASP top 10. I know like he's pretty well respected. When Michael came into that, it was like, honestly, I didn't know who he was at all. He wasn't in the space. So I think there'll be some advantages to having someone from our side of things actually leading up the organization. We'll see how much. We'll see how much he can get done. I know there's a lot of split focus on the OWASP side of things between, running the foundation and, running the conferences. That's where Michael's focus was. A lot of, making sure things were I guess, solvent, right? There's enough money coming in to handle everything and do what they wanted to do. But then you have all the different chapters, and the way that the chapters run is pretty, it's unique per location, right? Per chapter. It depends on the chapter leaders and what they want to do with it in each of the different locations. And some of them are very tight with OWASP, others are pretty loose. So it's an interesting organization. I don't know if you ever get away from the politics because of how distributed it is and how worldwide it is. That's always going to be a portion of it. So I don't envy Andrew stepping into that position, I guess is what I'm saying. Because we'll see how long it lasts. I hope for the best there. But it's also hard to watch, right? Like when this came out yesterday that Andrew was going to be the new executive director, there's 4 or 5 different Slack channels that I'm in that just page after page of people having opinions about, hey, what should happen, what is happening, gripes and positivity, right? It went all back and forth. So I really don't know what's going to happen there, but I know the resources is highly needed. From a focus perspective, having some sort of a place that we can go to that is kind of this authority on application security, we've got to have it. We've got to be able to point at something that is the reference for what it is that we do on a daily basis. So,
yeah.
And
by the way, the last executive director before Mike was Karen Staley. Staley. I'm not Staley. And I'm trying to remember. And my memory sucks, but there was an executive director before, and I'm pretty sure that's who was the person I mentioned I thought might have passed away, and that's why there was a lapse in or an effort to bring in a new director. But yeah, man, it's it's an interesting time. And then I don't want to get too much into. Well, I'll go as far as you want, Seth, but what I would say is that there were also other changes, like with the training, how that worked, where, they changed the sort of pay structure for trainers. I don't know how other trainers felt. It felt a little weird. It kind of incentivized us to want to pack classes because you don't get paid anymore, really, not much more for having a larger class. And I guess probably people aren't talking about that. And I'm not being harsh about it or me. It's just what happened. And financially, you can't even argue that. Financially, it just the percentage went way down for each additional head. So you're not being incentivized to have big training classes as a trainer. So that structure is kind of an experiment. I guess we'll see if that works out long term. So there's just been a lot of changes that are just, there's going to be change, an organization that's been around this long, that's big, global. But yeah, it's to be expected, and we'll see how that all goes.
Yeah. Well, I know Mike. Well, yeah, because we had conversations with him about it as they were talking about changing that structure. And it's not that they're not paying trainers anymore, but they're taking away the incentive that good trainers are going to want to present their content at OWASP conferences, right? That's really what it boils down to. And I don't know, I don't want to go into the AppSec days stuff either, right? Because you
mean the virtual ones over the summer?
Yeah, the virtual ones over the summer, because it feels again, the compensation for the people doing the work is very, very low as opposed to the people running a virtual conference, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, when we talked about it, I'll put it out there. My vote was for you and I to not submit for it for that very reason. It was very low. We do this because we want to do it for fun, and it's not all about the money. However, it does take a bit of time, and so there has to be some value. It does take quite a bit of time to do it right. I mean, you can half-ass anything and throw out training, and people will not be happy.
Yeah.
They'll have paid money, and it might be okay-ish. But, that's not how we run things. We like to put a lot of time into it. So if we're going to do multiple, my vote was, with multiple training sessions over the course of a summer with very little real upside financially. And the main thing too for you and I, and like I know for me, this is like the biggest thing is like actually meeting people physically in person. So if you say every few weeks you got to give training, it's not going to be a great pay, and you're not going to get to meet these people in person, your students, the people who you're trying to reach out and change their life for the better, their work life for the better. You know, what's the advantage there? What's the upside? So that was my vote to not do it. So.
Yeah.
No, total respect those. That's not to say they should. Everybody should do what they want, you know, do what's best for you. But yeah, that was my take on it. So for whatever that's worth.
Yeah. Well, that's
anybody.
Yep. And that's what we ran into, right? Is it's with OWASP specifically was kind of, okay, you know, what is the value? Where is it that they fit? And that's kind of like, you've got Black Hat and DEF CON, right? Like that run on a yearly basis. And, you know, Black Hat's definitely focused on corporate, like high value training. They bring in the best of the best to give those trainings. They fill up those classes. And that is the focus between that and then the conference talks as well. Whereas you've got DEF CON on the other side that's more of, hey, it's more affordable, right? But it's also more geared towards kind of the underground community, at least initially, right? Nowadays, you know, they blend a little bit, and you know, DEF CON has become more corporate, but it's still like Jeff tries to run it as this is for the community. This is not necessarily just a conference that is, you know, built for businesses. And where does OWASP fit within that, right? Because on one level, it's, you know, we're trying to make things affordable for people to get into those classes. And I totally get that, right? But if that's the play, if that's what they're trying to do, it needs to be very upfront. But then they're still trying to make a ton of money off of it, or like they're still trying to make money off of it enough to support other things. And so it becomes, all right, what is the point behind all of this, right? Like, what is the objective of the organization? And that's what I'm hoping to see out of the leadership is, this is our clear objective. This is where we want to be in the space. This is the value that we provide to the community, and we're going to stick by that. We're not going to change it every year or 2 years. It is. So I feel like that's where OWASP has kind of lost focus, right? Like we had the whole issue with the OWASP Top 10 a couple of years, right? The same sort of thing is, what is the point behind this? What is it that you're trying to do? Because if it is driven by a couple of companies, or if it's driven by like corporate interests, it becomes like a sales mechanism almost, right?
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, and which is what we don't want it to be.
Because something you said made me think of, like on that note, is that because basically what you were talking about with Black Hat and like the professionalism and everything. One thing people complain a lot about is not complain a lot, but when I hear complaints, it's never about how well the training went at Black Hat. It's always about the cost. It was like, well, that was a lot of money, but I didn't pay it. My employer paid it or whatever. But usually it's cost. It's never like quality. And why I say that is I think it's important to point out, in fairness to OWASP and in fairness to the decision-making around training, I actually you and I got a breakdown financially of what it looked like for one of the conferences last year. I'm not going to point out any specifics or give out any specific information. It was a little bit of a private conversation, but all I'll say is that the way the cost structure broke down, when you took away, basically they didn't make any money. They actually kind of lost money, I would even say, off that conference. And it was a similar deal for like 2 or 3 conferences in a row. So you know, when people complain about like Black Hat's prices, and not everybody, I'm not saying this happens all the time. I'm just saying that when I do hear something about Black Hat, it's usually about cost. It's almost always about cost. I think it's like important to remember that that price is so that they can bring, like what you said, make it highly professional, still have profit to reinvest into other things, and like give good training. So it's a weird situation because nobody wants to pay, too much, right? But there's the cost of those spaces are insane. Like when I saw the breakdown of some of these numbers, it was like, how in the world does anyone get away with and like, since Neil was watching earlier, I'm not sure if he's still on. Like one time he gave a quote on just like what it cost for coffee at Locomocosec. It's insane. The costs are insane. And the people that run these conferences, this is outside of OWASP now. This is just like people who run conferences in general. They really put a lot of line to do those. And I don't know if people appreciate how much goes into it. But anyways, yeah. So new leadership in OWASP. Hopefully things there can be consistency and they can raise the standards a bit on some of these things. I'm not talking about the cost or anything or finances or anything. I'm talking about the projects, like the technical projects. That's what I'd really like to see sort of get elevated and back in the limelight.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we're still seeing a whole bunch of activity on projects, right? Like,
right.
But you would like to see more continuity, right? Like more regular updates and, not quite so much split focus on what's the latest and greatest, but everything, the whole body of content that's there has to be continually updated, right? And I know like we've had Brian Class on the show before, who helps with OWASP Top 10 and the OWASP SAM project, and the amount of work that goes into maintaining some of those it's borderline a second job at times, right? And I know you know this as well, like running like the Rails Goat stuff, right? It can take over your life, right? It really can, especially if you're the only contributor there. And so, and this is a problem with open source projects in general, right? It's very hard to find reliable people that will continually upgrade and update and continue to support a project after it becomes stable, right? It just is, and life happens. People get busy, but I don't know how to maintain that continuity, and that's something that I would hope OWASP would be able to do, right? Because you look at some of the other things that are out there, like like Google Summer of Code, and the way that they push people into open source projects to keep things going. But there's very few projects that have that level of kind of continuity between developers and contributors. So,
no, yeah, anyway. Definitely. That's a hard thing to do is open source in general. In fact, like I've just recently in the last 2 months started picking back up with Rails Goat and like, getting some pull requests submitted in. I'm still not great about it, but yeah, it's for the first couple of years because Ruby on Rails was so hot when I feel like that's going to be a meme. For a while, Ruby on Rails so it was like that was like the thing, man. That was awesome. That was what everybody was going to. And so for me, like that did become a part-time job, actually. I mean, now that you mention it, that was really hard. It took a lot of time. And yeah, you're right. That's just one small project. There are much larger projects that have been around for much longer that, have multiple contributors, and it's no small effort. So yeah, man, I hope consistency. I hope we get somebody who can be the executive director for a while. And because it's like, damn, oh my God, Neil just posted that. Hold on. I'll just put it. There you go. Food and coffee alone was about $800 a head, not including the Lua. Yeah. That is insane. That is so insane, man. Yeah. That's what I mean. Like that's the price. And like from a financial risk perspective, that's not fun. And, no. And that's the other thing is you have to attract vendors, and for vendors to be attracted, there has to be a balance. That was including either way, $800 a head. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a steep price. I mean, think about that, because how long was Locomocosec, or this so-called conference? Was what?
Alleged conference.
Alleged like location. Yeah. But yeah, for a 2-3 day conference, like $800 a head for food, like I mean, I know everybody looks at that and they're like, oh, well, I eat for, $20 a meal or whatever it is. That's insane, right? That's where conference locations and hotels that host conferences, that's where they make their money, right? Like it usually it's on food, it's on lodging that's associated with it, that they actually make their money. And if you've ever been in conference organization, it's usually you get a better rate on space based on how much food you buy, based on like the number of people that book in the hotel where the conference is at using the conference rate, right? So like the space will come to you incredibly cheap because you're spending all of your money on these other things. And then you're taking that $800 a head and you're spreading that across, okay, there's these sponsors that are giving us so much money. So we have this much to play with. You know, maybe that's not all going directly back to conference attendees' cost of getting into the conference. But it's still like, it's this weird, hard balance to figure out. And that's probably nothing compared to what Black Hat pays. Like you think about those large banquets that they have and the food that's available there, and how much that ends up costing you when you're going to the conference or included in the price. I know that like each of those meals that you go to in Vegas is probably costing the conference a couple $100, right? Like it is. And so it's this insane kind of industry as it is. But then, man, we're all over the board today, Ken, but
whatever.
Yeah. But yeah, trying to run one of those conferences and putting it together, like take into account that the guys that are organizing this, like Nike Neal, they don't know how many people are showing up to this conference when they sign those contracts, right? It is a huge financial risk that you're basically on the hook for because you signed a contract with Marriott or Hilton or whoever for, you know, tens of thousands of dollars that you have to cover some way. And so you have to get people to the conference, you have to get vendors, and you have to get sponsors in order to make that happen. And it's a very stressful thing to do. It's not easy. So, yeah.
And we appreciate it for anyone who's going through that pain of doing that for the community. I'm like very appreciative of it. And then even more so, I think now that like we can't go to these conferences, it's going to be, you know, really nice to get back out and be in person with people. Like really, it will be really nice. So yeah, thank you to those folks. Hey, I wanted to mention one thing, by the way. One of our regular viewers rewrote Hunt scanner and for Burp and put it into the Burps app store. So I just kind of want to put that out there and kind of, you know, promote it. And I know you found another tool too that was of interest. I don't know if you wanted to talk to that too real quick since we're starting to run out of time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was one that just popped up that I was interested in because there wasn't really a good, I mean, I know PHP security vuln. I can't remember what the other one was called. But there's this new, Psalm scanner that's out there that is doing actual source to sync, like taint analysis of PHP that I felt was very interesting, right? Did you post that link? Sorry. The Psalm.dev?
I did not.
Here, let me see. I'll throw it up here.
Yeah, sorry. Actually, I think I was confused. I think Caleb wrote the Zap proxy.
No. Caleb did write the Hunt scanner remix stuff
for Burp too, not just for Zap. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's the Psalm one. There we go.
Where's that?
Oh, there you go. Is that the right link for Psalm?
Whoops. Yeah, it is. Yep. Psalm.dev. So it's a PHP static code analyzer, right? And I know in the past I've been pretty disappointed with the PHP ones, but the way that these guys are going about it feels more kind of CodeQL-ish or semelish, right? Like they're actually doing source-to-seek tracing. They're building a abstract syntax tree and then identifying the vulnerabilities from there. So it feels like the start of something good in the PHP world, right? And if I remember right, there was associated with a larger organization. So it's basically a sponsored. Crap! Now I can't find my link. Where did it go? Not dev. Because they were using it to scan. Oh, Vimeo. Yep, it's a Vimeo open source project. So they actually built it to analyze Vimeo source code, and they're open sourcing it. Yeah, so it feels like there's some real corporate sponsorship behind it to keep it going and keeping it up to date. I know some of the PHP tools that are out there, if you look at static analysis tools, they support older versions or they're not up to date. So this was one that I was actually excited to see because of how it came about. I was like, all right, somebody's taking this seriously and they've used it to identify vulnerabilities in Vimeo code, and then turning around after they fixed it and putting it out there for the larger community to use. So yeah. So there's my plug for Psalm. Static analysis tools in general, right? Like, depending on how they're used, we can get into it because I know I go back and forth on it. Everybody's heard me complain about Fortify and AppScan source at some point, right? Just because of the number of false positives that can come out of those tools, but that doesn't mean that there's not a place for them, especially in a CI/CD pipeline, right? If you're trying to push out PHP code, you want to be able to analyze it quickly and find those vulnerabilities. Here's a resource for you. Still not going to do away with some of the other things that we've talked about in the past, like unit testing and dynamic assessment and everything else that goes into it. But there is a place for it. So, yeah, rant over again, right?
No, not at all. No rant. I just wanted to make sure some of these tools got out. We mentioned these tools before we kind of closed it out. I know we had other things to talk about. Is there anything off our list that was like you just definitely wanted to make sure well, you know what? Oh man, there's one last thing I feel like we should just mention is that you brought it up, which was the Gov going and putting their going to the preload. Putting .gov sites on the preload list so that everything for .gov is HSTS, which is to just reiterate for anybody that's a little bit more junior, HSTS. So this is meant to, usually when you make a request off to a website, it'll respond with a header and it'll say, hey, we've got a strict transport security enabled. These are the options, because there's some configurable like time to live and things like that. Or max, whatever it was, I can't remember. But anyways, there's like these options that come back, and then your browser, after that first initial request, maybe it was over HTTP. Once the server says, "Hey, no, do this over HSTS," so only HTTPS, and never make a request outbound over HTTPS. That way, you don't leak like let's say the site was served over SSL and but there was an image source off to an HTTP. I think that's the general example we usually give people. Your request would go off to that image over HTTP. For that image over HTTP, your cookies would be leaked if they didn't have like a secure prefix or the secure flag set on them, something like that. Anyways, whatever. This preload list, what it does, it attempts to basically just say like, don't even make that first request to then figure out if it's got HSTS. In fact, just know that if it's like a .gov site, just don't send it, like you cannot send requests off over HTTP. So why that's, I think, interesting is that is a large effort. And I think that, because the article that I had read that you had sent over, Seth had mentioned them being like the government being bloated, which I don't disagree, obviously, but this is actually not the simplest thing to do for an organization as large as the U.S. government. That is not a small effort, surprisingly. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, not so surprisingly if you've ever tried to enable web security standards on even one website or a handful of websites, let alone all of the government. I see you have 3 links in here. Any of these that I need to post, Seth?
Here, let me give you this. This one is from home.gov.gov.
Okay.
This is that management preload list is the actual announcement from the government that, hey, guess what? Basically anything that is registered after September will be automatically preloaded into HSTS list. I know they've been rolling other sites in there, right? That was the whole point of the article. The initial article that came out was like, oh, look, the government is 5 years behind. And like, oh, open source, like, tech companies have been doing this for 5 years. I'm like, yeah, but the bureaucracy of the government and actually making those sorts of changes on a large scale. This is a fairly large, this is a big announcement, right? Like it, really will help secure things, especially from you're dealing with the government perspective and the amount of data that they have. So
yeah, and like the amount of various websites being hosted on .gov, it's not a small change. There's like also, you have to remember, like, and I don't know what it's like now because I haven't worked in the government for like a decade, but or more actually. I don't know, about a decade. Yeah, and man, it was very hard to get even small changes made. Like when I say, oh God, I'm sorry, I should say the change itself was small, but the impact was huge. Like an IDOR, like a SQL injection, like an XSS, something like that, right? So imagine you just say, okay, now listen, you got to make sure that you're prepared, that everything you've got can operate well over SSL, and you've thought about all of the potential impact and all that. So it's not the simplest thing in the world for the government to go to do that. So no surprise there.
Yep.
I guess that's the only other thing I wanted to make sure before we hopped off the podcast that we mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, thanks everybody for joining us today. I know we've been all over the board. We are out next week. We won't have an episode. Yeah, that's all good. Maybe I'll take some time too. But in 2 weeks, we'll have the discussion on inclusion. Right.
Yes.
So that should be interesting. That'll be a little bit different for you and I, right? It won't just be strictly technical, or even for the listeners. I don't want to say too much about it outside of it'll be different. I know, like, there's been a lot of interesting discussions flowing around about words that we use within the industry, and how they can be, they can make people feel unincluded, right? And how to change that and actually, be aware of what it is that we're actually saying and the power behind words. So it should be good. I'm excited to have the discussion, and I think it'll be a little bit different for all of us.
I think we it made sense to bring in somebody who actually has studied and actually this is their career to talk about diversity and inclusion versus, what do we know about that? I mean, honestly, like we're not professionals in it, so might as well just bring somebody on that. I appreciate Adam Migas who hooked it up for us.
Yep,
that was really nice. Very appreciative. So big thank you to Adam.
Yep,
and Laura.
Yeah, yep. It'll be interesting to talk to Laura about it, to see what she has to say. I don't know, because we're going back to the whole idea of the things that we've named and we use like commonly across the board, and at times like you don't even think about it, right?
I know, man. I've started thinking about all these stupid phrases that I use that have just been like things that we all hear and we just repeat and don't think much about it because it's just a common like phrase and then or saying, and then like sometimes they have like nefarious connotations in history, but you don't know it because it's so ingrained in our. So anyways, so we don't get it. I'm not even going down the road.
Yeah.
She'll let her talk about it. So.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Yes. Please join us in a couple of weeks. As always, come join the Slack channel. Come join the conversation. Ken and I are always on Twitter. DMs are open, as well as anywhere else if you've got questions or you want to chat about anything that we've talked about today or in previous episodes. So thanks again for everybody that joined and participated, and we'll catch you all in a couple of weeks.
Thank you all. Very much appreciative of it. Thanks.